We're going to go ahead and get started to keep people on time, because if I don't let these guys start, there won't be enough time for them. This is our drillers panel. They're going to, each one of our drillers, David, Harold, and Dave, they're going to speak individually. They've got a little presentation each. And then once they're done with that, they're going to sit down and they're going to do the Q&A portion. So with that, I'm going to let them take over. David?
Thank you, Jesse. Go ahead and put this up to David's size. All right, first I just wanted to say thank you to Steve and his group. I've been involved with coming to these conferences and presenting since we had the first one, I think in 2017. And it's just one of those conferences that I think is incredibly rare and incredibly valuable, because I think it's just not often enough that groups like this get together and really do some peer-to-peer learning about what we're doing across the country to provide safe drinking water out of private wells. And so I just wanted to take a moment and just, working with Steve for all these years has been phenomenal. I've known him for, most of the time I've done my work with NGWA, we've just crossed paths back and forth. And, Steve also is a better together guy, and I really value that aspect of how we work together to deliver a really, really important resource to people on a daily basis. And so today, I'm going to be talking about the water well industry. We already heard Marty talk about having a tough time finding contractors in a declining market. I'm going to kind of take you through some perspectives on why we are where we are, some challenges that probably still exist inside of the industry, and then we're going to try to talk a little bit about what we can do maybe together to try to help get all this on the even keel, get more resources available, and really make sure that people have the resources they need to get and have safe, affordable drinking water. And so as I've heard other people and other folks at agencies and other groups talk about, well, how do we fix the well contracting industry? How do we turn around the curve from receding to growing? And I've heard a lot of suggestions like, lowering testing standards, lowering experience requirements. Everything really revolves around some really kind of cheap shortcuts about how we might be able to do it. And it really kind of glazes over the real problems that are keeping people out of the industry and really keeping people from growing and coming into this industry. There's a lot of barriers, and we're going to go through a few of them in this presentation. A little bit about me. I work for Bergerson-Caswell Incorporated. Been around since 1948. We're a very diversified water well contracting outfit, working through municipal and residential water, a lot of geothermal systems, environmental drilling and sampling, water treatment, irrigation. Really, we've been pretty involved across the board on groundwater systems, whether it be environmental protection or groundwater extraction or thermal exchange with the ground. Me, the president of Bergerson-Caswell, took over running the company from my dad in 2017. I'm a third generation guy. My grandfather started at Bergerson-Caswell in 1949. So there's been a Henrik at BC since, basically since it was conceived. I also have a couple other small companies that work on geothermal, more of resource companies that provide software design tools for closed loop geothermal systems and provide testing equipment to figure out soil thermal capacities. I'm the current chair of the Minnesota Department of Health's Advisory Council on Wells and Borings. I chair the legislative committee for the Minnesota Water Well Association. I was the NGWA board president in 2018 and the MWWA president in 2019. So if you're curious as to why would we listen to this guy? Because I've put in a lot of time and effort to understand these things on a very wide range all across our country. I've got friends all over the place that listen to their stories, listen to their challenges. And the one thing that's been really interesting to me in all the time I've spent working with these folks is there's a lot of commonalities to the challenges, and somehow we've not really solved a lot of these things. Another thing, talking about peer-to-peer learning, I always try to figure out which 4 pictures do I put in this slide. And it's really interesting to kind of think about, how do I know what I know? I'm a water well contractor. I don't have an MBA. I don't have any kind of, super fancy degree in being good at this stuff, just a lot of experience, a lot of learning, a lot of, understanding that people have been doing this for a long time have one thing that intelligence will never give you, which is wisdom. And wisdom goes a lot farther in life than intelligence. I will tell you that right now. So, you'll notice, let's see if this does the thing. Okay. So as we think about the well contracting industry, and we ask ourselves, why is this industry not, sorry, I lost my notes slide here. Bear with me. And really, the biggest thing that's affected our industry is the economics of it all. There's been a lot of, especially as it comes to generational businesses, sometimes you don't think about evolution, you don't think about where you are. As I said, things like the cost of equipment, workforce constraints, the expected cost of the product. I mean, a lot of people kind of have that expectation for water, and thus they don't place a lot of value on how important it is. And so some of the things that I've seen over my career on where people think about building a new home and they brag about their $40,000 granite countertops and then complain about their $20,000 water supply. One of these things is highly critical to exist on the face of the planet. The other thing is just a thing that's nice to look at. Gave a presentation to a bunch of realtors a couple years ago. And right off the bat, one of the folks, pipes in, is like, "Why are wells so expensive?" Go through the presentation, and then when we get to the end, she's like, "Well, maybe it was the septic system I thought was expensive, because this well thing makes perfect sense." And so there's people don't understand, and that's what I found so many times in this stuff, is that it's not that they just don't know enough. They need to be educated. I think people think you need to push people into these things, and the reality is, if you just provide people the information, they generally come around to a better conclusion. We just need to put more of it out there, and that's why, as I hear all these outreach programs that we're working on, it's probably the most effective way to get people to evolve their perspective. It's so hard to make people do things, but if you help people understand why they're doing a thing, you'll get much better results. Well driller core competencies. Well drillers are very good at making water from dirt. Well drillers are not always very good business people. We spend a lot of time doing things with our hands and getting things accomplished. And as we think about this contractor shortage, it puts even more pressure on the accomplishing what we do, but not doing the part about making sure that we're running viable businesses that have things that can reinvest in themselves, that can continue to grow, that can bring people in, that can keep up with the expected wage rates. I mean, there's all these really complicated things that if you get 12 months behind on these kind of strategic issues, you get down that slippery slope where you can't get back. The Great Recession kind of started the slide. I'm going to kind of follow up on that here in just a second. Business life cycles have a lot more to do with it than you think. But as we think about that recession, the supply and demand really has a lot to do. Right now we've dipped under, right? A lot of demand, not a lot of supply. And so we're seeing some of these constraints, but it's fixing some of the economic problems that existed inside of this industry. So, we may just be in a trough that we're going to work out of, because a lot of the times we think about how do we fix these things, how do we trick these things into doing what we want them to do, and it really is James Carville 101. It's the economy, stupid. The economy needs to come along to support these activities, and if they're worth doing, the economy will straighten itself out. That always happens. And it's a little bit of a challenging time for small businesses on the whole. So it's just another kind of thing that we may not be able to do a lot about, but something that absolutely has some influence on what's happening inside of the market. So as you think about how did we get here, this slide tells you everything about why we are where we are. You go back pre-recession, this is Minnesota data, but I suspect if we go through every state, you're probably going to see a very similar curve in that we had pre-Great Recession, we're sitting at 13,000 wells. Today, right, we're at 6,600, we're at half the capacity. So when you think about why is our lab capacity shrinking? Why are all these things going away? there's just half the workload that used to be there. And so without the economics to sustain those things, you see things contract. And this is where we're going to come back to this generational component in a moment, but you can only draw these things out so far before you just watch things just kind of fritter away. And so, of course, this has led to this. Again, Minnesota data, but I'm pretty sure everybody's going to kind of nod their heads and say, yeah, it seems familiar. 332, 331, 316, 304, 285, 281. I hear we're down to somewhere around 260 in Minnesota now. So, I mean, it's quite a drop off in the amount of licensed professionals that were doing this work. And why? So, equipment, let's talk about this. This is the thing that really traps you, especially if you were one of those companies that was just making it through that downtime. On that screen is about $2 million worth of stuff to start, okay? $2 million of stuff just to get going. And that's the basics, just a drill rig, a pump hoist, a support truck, an excavator, a grout machine, some drill rod, and some other iron to make it go. And that is to go drill $20,000 house wells. Okay, that's not even talking about doing any kind of more advanced or higher level groundwater activities, places where margins are better. This is just to go do a thing that you've got to do a lot of in order to afford that stuff. As you think about the business model behind affording all this, maybe it's a good thing Buddy didn't come with, because like we'd never make it through here, because he'd step and go, testify. I mean, he'd be right behind. Like it'd be like the State of the Union address where you say something and people clap for 5 minutes. So Buddy, Jeff Williams, a few of us that have recognized some of these problems have started doing some education to try to help contractors think about these broader financial implications of their companies. And it's amazing when you listen to people like Jeff and Buddy talk, the amount of chatter that comes up after their presentations lets you know you're on the right track. People leave the room, all you do is hear people talking back and forth about the things they didn't take 5 minutes to think about. Workforce issues. I Googled modern workforce. These are the 3 first images that Google populated. Anybody around here been around a well rig and still have a hard hat that clean? Okay, I mean, this expectation of what we've kind of, number one, blue collar labor has been undervalued for a very, very long time. It's just something we didn't recognize it, didn't appreciate it. And then we're shocked. Why don't people want to do it? Well, nobody respects it. Nobody thinks it's important. Nobody values it. I don't get to go home at 5 o'clock every night. I have to travel to go do things. I have to work hard. I mean, there's just, we haven't valued blue collar labor the way we should. And it's starting to catch up to us really hard right now. Technical skills aren't really being taught in large at schools. So I've seen as the younger we get and the more people we bring in, the less tools they have for us to build off of. It is really from square one with most of the people that we're bringing in that are, 25 and under. I mean, you have to really, things that you absolutely take for granted, things that when you've been doing it for 30 years, but you still also have to figure out how do you get back even further than you were with the base skills you had when you started. Life cycles. This is really important to understand, especially in generational businesses. Every business goes through this, okay? And the thing that's important for sanitarians, health officials to understand is that when businesses get caught at this fork in the road right here, it's really hard because you got 2 choices here. And the farther you get down the death path, the farther it takes and the farther you fall back down the start of that life cycle. You can go from being a competent company to an incompetent company, depending on if you get too far down there. Now, the trick is with these companies, it takes a long time to figure this stuff out. So even, Burgerson Caswell was at that fork in the road in 2017. Took me 2 or 3 years to figure out how to get things reorganized and get us back into that rapid growth phase. And so as I look at some of the other contracting companies that are doing the same thing, and people say, well, they're struggling with this, they can't figure that out. I'm like, yeah, no, 2 to 3 years is what it's going to take for them to functionally get this stuff going again. So have patience with them. Realize that they're trying to figure some stuff out and that running these companies is very complicated. Tough climate for small businesses. Not that we can do a lot of these things, but realizing that that these economics, these pressures, these limitations on trying to run small companies really puts a lot of pressure. That's very accurate. Being the pig in the middle of the wolf and the fox on a steep drop to who knows where. Those are the choices that are kind of out there for small business owners. So how do we turn this around? First, recognize there is no shortcut. This will not, just like every other groundwater problem that we create for ourselves, it probably takes us about 10 times as long to get out of the mess we just created for ourselves. So know that it's going to take dedicated long-range planning and some thoughtful planning to get through it. Improve and expand continuing education to target real solutions. I need to sit through another grouting presentation like I need another hole in my head, okay? There's this finite list of things that we offer continuing ed for. I don't need to learn how to mix bentonite again. I don't. I need to get to these higher education topics to make sure that our business survives for another 75 years. Clearly recognize the value of private wells provide, and periodically promote good work. I would say that the high bar for praise that I've gotten from the Department of Health lately is that they recognize that private wells can be a good source of drinking water if they're properly constructed and maintained. That's a compliment. Okay, we need to do better than that, and we need to promote it. They had a 6-part series on the hidden heroes of water supply. 20% of all water in Minnesota is from private wells. 20% of the water consumed in Minnesota is coming from private wells. So if you have 6 stories about water providers, if we're in the era of equity, how many of these stories should be about a private well contractor? At least one, right? No, just not recognized that the work that we do and the value that it brings. Recognize industry expertise and develop leaders. You have to work with people to continue to develop them along the paths so you can get people from where they are to where they need to be. I was not born, okay? I was 15 years of working with people from all over the country to understand how to be a better leader. And a lot of people put time into my development. We need to put that time into other people around us to make sure that they can keep growing as well. This striving for perfection, realize that every water supply comes with trade-offs. Perfection is hard to attain. We need to try to get really good at what we do, but understand that it's not going to be flawless, and try to figure out how to find the gray edges to make sure that we can do water supply without getting too hung up on making sure that everything is perfect. Work with and involve the industry in improving standards. Just telling people to do something is one thing, getting them to understand why we're doing it is a complete other thing. Defend your people, stand up. A lot of other trades, a lot of other agencies really get to the, standing up for the people that they regulate. Have the same kind of pride in the people that you are regulating. And when their industry is getting, pushed around by other people, stand up for them, work together, better together mentality. And then as we think about maybe the biggest thing is think about how else we can use groundwater. One of the things that we're working on in Minnesota right now is this concept of what do we do with municipal water supply and what are we using that water for? Well, does it make a lot of sense to pump deep aquifer water, run it through a treatment plant, store it in a water tower, put it through miles of piping, and then dump it on the grass at the HOA? Probably not, right? Shouldn't we be doing like stormwater capture with some shallow wells for augmentation instead of using all this high energy water in low energy applications? Things like that create market for the groundwater industry, and functionally they're a better water policy. Do they get into municipal water budgets? You bet. But guess what? The municipal water budget we're getting into is all peak. There's no base load for irrigation. So you built this 300 million gallon a day plant for the peak day in summer, when functionally the rest of the year you only needed 100. So the economics of it just don't make sense. The fact that I'm standing here talking about that and it's just not a widespread knowledge just shows you how we haven't really thought about what we're doing with groundwater supply. And improve well codes and code compliance. You have to have good standards. In Minnesota, when they think about wellhead protection areas, they still look at wells as potential contamination sources. The reality is they're not. There's really not an instance where a code well has been a contamination source, but we need to make sure that our codes keep us above that level. We need to make sure that the wells that we're putting in the ground are inert and aren't a hazard to the wells around them or the wells that you're using. So thank you. And this again is a better together moment, because together we can improve these things, and together we can bring this back, and it will take everybody. I mean, it'll take health officials, industry, it'll take manufacturers, suppliers. It's going to take the whole gamut of us to really kind of understand and improve the climate for the water well industry.
I'm Harold Albrecht, and I think this is the right place. And I'm the only guy in my home, and I've been told a number of times, don't get off script, so. I'm not standing in a hole. I'm Harold Albrecht, and we run a water well drilling business in northern Illinois, Ohio, Illinois, and also a farming operation, pardon me. And both of these markets include, commercial grain and beef production, and then water supply for various needs. But both of these markets have evolved with increasing regulations and price restraints, and it requires continuing education for these operations to be viable, and that's really why we're all here today, too. There's a point to me bragging here, but I'm on the Illinois Department of Public Health Advisory Board for water well and water well drilling, pump installation, and geothermal drilling. And I help develop questions for various certification exams, licensing, and registration. And I proctored a lot of exams and tried to explain our stupid questions and refine them. All right, this is better maybe. And also I've helped develop revisions for the code. And I also maintain its voluntary master's groundwater certification that's offered by the National Groundwater Association. This is an important slide. All right, do I need to read that? Am I right? This information was supplied, it's old information supplied in 2017 by our Department of Public Health in Illinois. It shows not really a downward trend, but we're going to call it that way, over here's about 25 years. And about 2008, there's a big drop, or 6, very parallel to the timeline of one of David's slides in the previous presentation. Okay, and we started out in the early years, 7 to almost 9,000, a little over 9,200 wells permitted in Illinois, to now we're kind of hanging around the 2,300, 22 per year. Here's more information that hasn't made it hasn't been refined yet. Our department is working on it. And I don't see our program director here, so he won't be embarrassed that it's not done yet. But this another 5-year snap. The second column shows the number of permits for constructing, deepening, and sealing wells, and that's still in the 2,000, 2,300, 2,900 range, not the 5 or 9,000 like previous years. This is an odd title, but there's a trend or shrinking workforce and market in Illinois. And as shown in the previous 2 slides, the number of permits each year has gone down generally. There have been few steps, but there are certainly fewer drilling and service contractors than there were 30 years ago. And this trend is also reflected in the decline in membership in our associations related to our industry. What's driving this? Business cycles, like David explained, but also in Illinois, there's more community water systems in lieu of private wells. So you don't have that 50 separate wells for a subdivision. You might have one or two. Or weaker housing market that comes and goes. We happen to, I mentioned our farming operation. We straddle several markets: municipal, industrial, and housing market, and also agriculture. And there are fewer wells drilled for new irrigation systems. And in our climate, in our geology, we have a plethora of water with annual recharge. So we don't have the water shortage, but some of the water is more economical to access for irrigation. And a lot of that territory has been developed, so that market has kind of matured. And then the last, there are more financially attractive jobs elsewhere for young people other than the groundwater industry. And a lot of that trend is dollar-driven. Our family conversations often, and I'm off script now, so don't, a lot of them are about what are we supposed to learn from this, whether it's been something tragic happen in our life or some other trend outside our control, and how do we live and adjust so we can live in it gracefully. So regardless of this trend that we see, what needs to happen, and we need to recognize whether we're well drillers or inspectors or other administrative regulatory people, we need to recognize the valuable experience of the aging workforce in both the contractors and the regulators. We have to train new blood, find it first and train it, retain what has been learned and what was relevant. I don't think anybody else recognizes this drill site, and that's what I looked like about 42 or 3 years ago. It's about halfway between Riyadh and Iraqi border, or about 2/3 towards the Iraqi border. And I don't know what I did to my parents that they would encourage me to go work in the desert. But we did wear hard hats and other safety equipment, but that's been a while. And actually, the most valuable experience I learned or gained over there had nothing to do with drilling wells. I learned a lot about personnel management and learning to work together. We had Pakistani, we had Syrian, we had Filipinos, and 6 guys from the United States. And oddly enough, the biggest hurdle was not a language barrier. It was trying to talk when it took more than just talking. It took listening and communicating. Here we need to train young blood, and if you look there carefully, there seems to be a very small person holding a sieve to catch samples. I can neither confirm nor deny any laws were broken with child labor there, but okay. Same way with this, but this might be the same person about 20 years later. Okay, continuing training. Here we are. This gadget we're all looking at is a mud puppy. It's a system to remove the solids from the drilling fluid when it's water or water-based, and it gets recirculated. It might have bentonite or some polymers in it. And to reuse that, we try to glean the solids out of that. And we were way behind the curve on this. We got a used one, and how are we going to use it? And it looks better than the day we bought it. But it's a good system if it's applied properly in the right situation. The same thing is going on here. This is one of the systems that we designed started in the mid-70s, and this is probably a 12 or 1,600 foot irrigation well, kind of north of here, about probably 100 miles around that latitude. There's quite a few of these wells, and these take a different plan, but a different experience and knowledge. And then back to retaining what we have learned in the past and what was relevant. We need to learn what is relevant now. We don't need to know how to make so many windmills or these reciprocating pumps that might be motor driven or with a handle. There's very few of those around, or windmills. And we need to know what will be relevant henceforth. And we need to develop and apply our codes. I'm from Illinois. I'm kind of focused on that. And we have to apply it literally when it's a good fit for textbook cases. I've heard people say, follow it anyway. Well, can be a mistake. We need to learn to apply and respect the spirit of the law or the code when the letter of the code doesn't quite fit. Judgment calls make life complicated in a lot of areas. Some cases, the variances, construction may require that some variances are issued. Most of these situations can arise even for the most carefully designed and managed projects, and both large and small. Here are some unseen situations that have occurred. Those who have studied fluid mechanics treat air and water and various other gases as fluid. So sometimes you encounter a high pressure fluid like water that might be confined, and it comes out of the ground when you encounter it. I think in South Dakota, middle of that state, there's some deep bedrock wells that when you encounter this formation, it's recharged from some mountain hills or something to the west. And those have a real high elevation. So some of the shut-in pressure for that flowing artesian might be 90 or 100 PSI and flow lots of water. So dealing with karst in bedrock, when it's overlain by sand and gravel that's saturated. You're trying to drill this well to code like we've done hundreds of, or maybe inspected hundreds like it, and they drill through this sand and gravel, and when you encounter a cavern that can drain all the drilling fluid out of the hole, that fluid is what keeps that sand and gravel that's saturated stable. And when that goes down into the cave, then the sand and gravel can collapse. And sometimes it sticks the tools in the hole. If it comes right clear to ground, like in a coarse grain water table aquifer that comes right to the surface. I don't have pictures, and it wasn't our drilling equipment, but it can make a crater and the back of the drill rig settle until the front axle was well off the ground. And it's nice when that happens to somebody else's drill rig instead of ours, and nobody gets hurt. Another one, how do you grout the casing where the hole's unstable? How do you grout it and get a good feeling that we're respecting the code if we can't do it by the letter of the law? And grouting it past karst formations or caverns in bedrock. This can happen whether you're drilling a little well for water or a big well for water or geothermal loop, and you try to grout that, and there's this cave that just keeps taking everything you put down it. Sometimes that takes a different plan, and I'm sure there are many others. So this is really what this talk is about, whether we're speaking Arabic or Tagalog and still trying to work together. It's not important as learning to communicate, and it takes more than talking. And I've been scolded, or I don't know what was going on in Arabic with a machine gun in my stomach, and all I had to do was try to be nice and wait till the energy kind of moved away. It didn't help for the guy to keep yelling at me, but it was better than other options. So it takes more than talking. Explaining and listening are essential, and it may not, but it may help with understanding. And facts are more valuable than fiction and drama. We've helped people get their drill pipe out of the ground that's stuck in northern Illinois because of some earthquake event in Alaska, and it takes a lot of imagination to rationalize that, or for me to rationalize it. So stick to facts. And good timing will help avoid surprises and anxiety. That means the well drillers might want to talk to the health departments or their representatives. So, this might happen, and these are the scenarios that may play out, and how do we anticipate them and be comfortable with how we move beyond. Okay? And then as you're trying to work together, you work and hope for the best. Good synergy is more likely to happen when everybody is careful and respectful of each other. My daughter was doing a continuing ed for Department of Public Health a week ago. No, actually, it was last, I think, Wednesday for Illinois. And she posed a question to some of the regulators. What are the things you wish you knew your first year on the job? These are some of the questions that came back. Where's a place to stand during observation? Where's a good place? A safe place? And how do I ask questions without getting in the way or making things dangerous or hindering the progress? And what are the basic components of this system and their purposes? Here's another one. Is this thing a drill rig or a pump hoist, or is it something else? I've looked at drill rigs and I've wondered, is this what I'm supposed to use? But in the middle of some developing country, the answer is yes, it's going to be used for drilling. So, is this well disinfected after it's chlorinated? Maybe. Maybe not. Why can't a bacteria-free sample be obtained reliably from a point of use anywhere in the house? Anybody wondered that? Not for long? And I don't know how to answer this one. How can the line of communication get so messed up between the owner and the contractor and the Department of Public Health? And sometimes an engineer or two in there. I never fess up to being in that club in public or here. All right? All right.
I got like an hour and a half left, don't I? All right, that's what I thought. Can everybody hear me all right? Yes? Everybody over there can hear me all right? Good. Sounds good. Thank you all for being here. I'll try and keep this concise. I know we just had lunch. If I see any sleeping, nodding heads, I do have something to throw. So just pay attention. Here we go. I am not a driller. I'm not a contractor. I'm not a digger. But what I consider myself to be is a groundwater professional. I have never worked on a rig. I have power washed 2 of them. That's as close as I have gotten to working on a rig. That's a story for another time. But what I do want to talk about is the relationship between industry and agency. How many of you work for an agency? If you raise your hands, please. Maybe I should ask who doesn't work for an agency. All right, there's a number of you. Thank you. The phrase better together used to be used quite often within our industry at NGWA. I continue to use it, and what I want to do is share some information and focus a little bit on what one of the states that I work with does to better the relationship between the association, i.e. industry, and agency. And that's going to focus a little bit on how the Michigan Groundwater Association Fundamentals course has strengthened the topic of groundwater within the state. First off, my name, Dave Schulenberg. I'm the Director of Partner States for the National Groundwater Association. For those of you that aren't familiar with what Partner States is, we have reached out, or the state associations have reached out to NGWA to partner with the association to provide management services. Partner states right now, I'll do this quick: California Groundwater Association, the Kansas Groundwater Association, the Michigan Groundwater Association, the Montana Water Well Drillers Association, the Illinois Association of Groundwater Professionals, the Kentucky Groundwater Association, the Minnesota Water Well Association, the New Mexico Groundwater Association, and Oregon Groundwater Association. In my role as the Director of Partner States, I'm their executive director for all 9 states. I have intimate knowledge between industry and agency, between contractor, the relationships in all of those 9 states. Some are more in depth than others. I have been in this industry for 25 years as the Minnesota Water Well Association executive director. I've been NGWA Director of Partner States for 13. The rest of those come along with that. Better together. How can we continue to be better together? A couple of you in here will probably recognize some of these pictures, the people in these pictures, but these are images and another one that looks like this from our fundamentals class, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. A lot of what we talk about in being better together deals with perception. Agency versus industry. How do each of these entities view each other? I asked how many agency members are in there. You don't have to answer this, you don't have to tell anybody this, but how do you react? How do you visualize? How do you perceive the groundwater industry and those individuals working in it? Is it adversarial? Do you have a negative relationship with some of the groundwater professionals? Vice versa, they may have the same issues with agency. It could be a historical concept that goes back to what the image is. And I talk about images in another talk. But these two nouns right here, when you say them, what image comes to your mind with digger and driller? It was something that NGWA talked about back in the 40s in changing the image and perception of what is a digger to what is a driller. And so just in one image alone, you can see the difference between a digger and a driller. We don't dig a well. There's no shovel that goes in and digs a well anymore. You construct a groundwater system. You construct potable water systems. And the people that do that deal with the reality, and they have to deal with the change of becoming a groundwater professional. WebTroll, one of the suppliers, put together the slide on the right about what is a water well professional. Change that to what is a groundwater professional. These individuals, David, Harold, anybody else that you deal with that you may have called a well digger or a well driller, look at what they have to go through. And this is generally accurate across the country. Hydrology, drill rig operation, geology, accounting, because they're small businessmen and women. They have to maintain drill logs. They have to be a pump installer, a water well driller. They have to know about water quality. They have to deal with state testing, state regulations, a code. Do I have to follow a code? Do I not have to follow a code? All of these things while trying to maintain an 8 to 8, a 6 to 6 job, a family, a community, and giving back to them. The gentleman on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 well-respected individuals, over half of those master groundwater contractors, the rest of them past presidents of NGWA or becoming a past president of NGWA, groundwater professionals. So not all states are the same. Just a quick highlight, there are some, as we talked about earlier in here, that don't have regulations, that aren't codes, that don't have to deal with this. A lot of the states have to have continuing ed. Michigan, right down somewhere up here, there it is, right here. They don't need to have continuing education. However, the state association has found it invaluable not to educate our members. And by doing that, involving what used to be DEQ, which is now EAGLE, involving them with it because of this phrase up here, better together. Every member of that board understands that we are better together, and we continue to use that. So this is an image from a couple of years ago where we had one section of a ballroom like this to capacity because of what it is. So I want to talk a little bit about education and Michigan's take on it. And I know I'm still stuck with some time here. But it's a 2-day event, and it's a 2-track event. So on one side, you have the fundamentals class. The other side, you have an advanced class. It's not all that different, but what it does is it focuses on individuals that are agency, local health departments, EAGLE, any other state agency, as well as individuals looking to take the driller's test. And then you have on the side, the professional side, those members who are the owners, operators, senior employees within the company, and the tracks are vastly different. You're dealing with employee retention, OSHA, stress, advanced techniques for air compressors. And over on the fundamental side, you're talking about the different types of drilling. So what I want to do is just share with you in this 2-day event what day 1 looks like for the fundamentals class. They start out talking about the drilling methods in Michigan: well plugging, grouting code, well chlorination and disinfection, well classification, wellhead completion, isolation, and then a session on coordinating, cooperating, and communicating between the entities. EAGLE, this has got to be updated, I know that. MGWA, health departments, local health departments, etc. They also continue on to go with well records, commonly misinterpreted rules, well drilling, and pump installers exam. And then they break out and they participate with the advanced side with understanding, learning from, talking to the vendors. It's a tabletop event. It's very expensive to bring a $2 million drill rig to Frankenmuth, Michigan, and keep it outside in mid-February or sometime around there. So what they do is they combine it for a tabletop. But now that you have gone through all of these 45-minute sessions, you can now go and talk to those vendors who may have been an instructor to get more information, whether you are a contractor's helper, or you're a local health department. And it gives you the opportunity to speak to one of the board members, one of the groundwater professionals, to come out and do a one-on-one out in the hallway and ask that all-important question that you wouldn't have asked in front of your colleagues. Can you go over again what a drill rig is? Can you tell me again what chlorine is? Or whatever that question is, you can ask that. It's in that kind of better together, fostered work environment. Day 2 continues on. It's a little bit more specific in what it is. You're talking about water system sizing and design, pump principles, pressure tank principles, VFD principles, soil samples, water conditioning, electrical equipment testing overview. It's hands-on. There's pumps that are brought in by the supply houses. Take it apart, put it together. Here's this, here's that, here's what we talked about. So you deal with all of those type of things. And I won't put anybody on the spot, but if there's any terms on here, we'll be around for a little bit. We can certainly help answer those questions on a one-on-one outside if you want to. It's easy. The who's, who participates in these, in the fundamentals that works together with MGWA. EAGLE, the State of Michigan Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. the suppliers and manufacturers, the Michigan Geological Society, and the members of the MGWA. I'm going to go back here again with the Michigan Geological Society, because right down here, everybody comes together to talk about soil sample identification. There's multiple layers of geology and our drillers have to go through. Bring up the samples, log them in whatever system you have. So you have black dirt, gray dirt, sandy gray dirt, dark gray dirt. What other colors am I missing? Brown dirt, red dirt, yellow dirt. All of these types of things have a classification for it. They may vary from state to state, region to region. System that's put in that you have to put on your logs. However, it's not just in the fundamental side, it's on the advanced side. So you have the 75-year-old who's still out there drilling, coming in and saying, okay, I have to take a little quiz now, and I'm gonna put my hands on the dirt, and I'm gonna put it on here, and this is sample this. And then everybody goes back and finishes out the last 2 hours, whatever it is, but it's all together. And the Geologic Society has done a very great job in providing that dirt, those samples, those core samples in 10-foot boxes. And we have about a dozen tables of them all lined up. So that's who partners with that. You talk about budget. What do we do with it? How do we get and encourage people to come? It's a 2-day registration if you're a member of the association or you're with DEQ, which is now Eagle, and an LHD, a local health department. You can come at $250. That gets you 2 days of education, hands-on, vendor, plus I feed you. It feeds you lunch, and you can come to the banquet too. And if you're in Frankenmuth, it's really good chicken. If you're a non-member, it's a little different. However, you may look and say, God, I can't afford $250. My department can't do it. It's a budgetary constraint. The association realizes this, and so they do a sanitarian sponsorship. They reach out to the members of MGWA to say, will you sponsor a sanitarian? That member will say, yep, here's an extra $100, here's $200. You know what, it's been a good year, here's $500. So now Jill from Traverse City can come and be sponsored with it and help offset the cost of that. Because it's that important to not just the association, but the agencies to be part of that association, to be part of that event, to learn together. So it's not adversarial when you are out on a job site in Midland in August and it's hot and humid and your hard hat isn't clean anymore and you have a stupid question that you think isn't a stupid question, but it may be, but it's not. There's no adversarial thing. So to get back to Harold's question is, when is a good time to ask that question? When it comes up. Because you develop that relationship with that agency, with that driller, with that groundwater professional to be able to ask that question. So, went back a couple of years. The association has combined this event for the last 6 years, if I remember right. It's been about 6 years since we had it split. They used to be done in February, then the association would have a show in March. We started bringing these together, but the last 2 years, I provided some stats for you, because you have to have a presentation with stats. It's increased. It continues to increase because there is that recognition of what we're doing has a value between the association and the industry. And finally, I want to leave with just a brief email message that was sent to me as the executive director and my board leadership from Sarah Pearson, who's a source water unit supervisor for the department, or the Drinking Water and Environmental Health Division. And I think you all could read it up there, but it's basically a thank you note for a great opportunity to be able to be better together, and that they see a value to it, and to please keep it up. So that's who I am. How did I do on time? Did I kind of run through that?
You got 5 minutes left.
My name is Dave Schulenberg. I'm going to take all 5 minutes. But I guess that's the message that I would want to leave with you all, is that there is something like this going on in all of the partner states. It's something that, as staff, I talk to the boards about. We try and foster that relationship and drive that. So the fundamentals course in Michigan is one option, one idea and one thought. So as with Dave and Harold, we're happy to take questions. Thank you.
So, Steve? Just need to read the questions. All right, guys. He didn't say there was a speaking part to this, so bear with me. All right. You guys ready to answer? Is your mics working? Awesome. Okay. All right. First question, and I'm assuming this is to any of you that want to answer it, or him, because he's got 5 minutes left, right? How do you anticipate the high water use data centers popping up across the country to impact the water well drilling industry? Did I say that right? Yeah.
I'll take that one.
Go ahead.
Because that's really, my expertise is geothermal systems. I'm just kind of sort of a novice at water well contracting. And the reality is, when we get into these high energy data centers, the primary load runs off of the cooling capacity that they need in order to keep the servers from boiling the building to the ground. And so there's gonna be a lot of interesting technologies. There's one that Bergerson Caswell has been working with for the last 5 years called Darcy Solutions, which uses a submerged closed loop heat exchanger, and is more of an aquifer-based geothermal that actually doesn't consume groundwater. So there's going to be technologies like that, pump and injection systems. You're going to see a lot of systems like that. They're going to come around to help manage the loads that these data centers are going to put on. So I actually view it as, Bergerson Caswell's drilling load is 100% tied up in those systems until the middle of next year right now. So how is it going to affect the well drilling industry? It's going to put more of a burden on the slim resources that it has. But it's okay. Training people is kind of an overnight process, so we should catch up in no time.
All right. All right. The next one, is there anything in particular that drillers would like for those of us on the health or other water regs side to emphasize when talking to residents about the realities of wells? E.g., drilling deeper doesn't magically fix any problem. Anyone?
I think that one of the biggest things that, as we do a lot of water testing for private wells for homeowners, we find that probably 9 out of 10 or better failed bacteria tests come from damaged or missing well caps. So if there is one thing that every sanitarian or health official could do is, and I think we saw it in the Michigan presentation this morning, yes, I know I'm responsible for my water system. No, I didn't know what that meant. So telling them what that means on a yearly basis, go and check that cap, do that water screening, water test. I think that helps do the one thing that's important to all of us, which is make sure that everybody's drinking the highest quality water that they can.
I think the other thing would be to remember to utilize the relationship that has been established already between the contractor and that homeowner. Whether they have a good relationship with that contractor or not, but to understand who those contractors are within that area. Because I understand that as agency, you may not be able to say, well, call Joe because call Joe. But you can say, look, there are 10 water well contractors within 10 miles of your house. Here's who they are. Give one of them a call. They will be able to come out and talk to you one-on-one about this, that, and the other thing.
That's good. All right. Oh, it popped to the top. Do you think there could be, I'm going to read these with proper grammar, guys, sorry. Do you think there could be a collaboration between drilling businesses and technical schools to provide programs for training prospective drillers? I think Harold talked about that a little bit too, didn't you?
There could be. I guess the answer is yes.
You're not going to give me more than that.
Harold is notoriously a man of few words. Unless you're not done yet.
I wasn't quite done.
Okay.
I think there needs to be, and I enjoy learning and I enjoy being around others that are learning, and I'm irritated by those that don't. And that's true with a 3-year-old or a older person. And I do think we need to interact with the trade schools and have the business interact with them. And yesteryear, I lived with I still live with her incidentally, but she used to be a guidance counselor and brought a lot of the businesses into the classroom in high school. And then in the National Water Well Association has a program I think it administers the, what's it called with the NGW University. And so there are a lot of resources out there, so we need to share them. And then also Awesome Aquifer, or whatever it's called now, and that is for kids in the classroom, maybe in the lower grades. So it's, we have to start that and encourage it at a young age if we expect them to be interested in it later. And I, one more little tangent, my daughters all played a lot of classical music, piano, and parent after parent said, well, how did you keep them practicing? I said, you listen to them. I said, what do you mean? You give it value, you listen to them. And that's the same way with well drilling too. My daughter was young when she was sampling, and she's interested and active in this industry and in others today because of that. So,
Thank you. I won't call on you again, make you talk.
what?
All right, let's see. The next one, workforce. The workforce seems to be a big issue across sectors. Public water systems also express this and need more water operators. Not saying it is a competition, just wondering what your thoughts are improving workforce and water industry in general and private well industry particularly. So what are your thoughts on workforce issues? I'm assuming. Anyone? Do you want me to tag you?
Yeah.
No, I'll just jump in.
All right, go ahead.
More we find in the
One of the things that Dave and I have done the last dozen years, probably, it seems like, is in Minnesota, there is a Drinking Water Institute class that the Department of Health, the AWWA, and Hamline University have collaborated with to educate the educators on water, whether it's groundwater or whether it's surface water, if it's private water, if it's municipal water, whatever you want to call that. And one of the things that we have discovered is by participating in that, it opens up the eyes to those educators who are K through 12 that have maybe 2.5 days to talk about the hydrologic cycle or hydrology in one sense or another, and to at least plant the seed that there is an entire industry available to students that may not be going on to somewhere else, kind of like what that last question talked about is with a trade school or something like that. That's a whole other conversation that we could get into, but at least having the ability to reach out to educators is very important, and it starts with an hour presentation. It starts with a kid's book about getting a new water well. It starts with the Awesome Aquifer kits.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? There's so many schools. How do you guys reach them? How do you think are there events you go to?
It's really the biggest problem with the education piece is that there's not enough spaces available to develop the economy, to put together the classwork and get the people to attend it, and then make sure it all works. Because, strangely, universities or other higher education institutions need to make sure they can afford to perform the classes that they're putting on. And so the education piece, as we've gotten into more distance learning, I think that's where the door kind of opens up to do more learning like what we're doing with NGWA and Oklahoma State University. Erica, am I anywhere on the track to answering your question?
Yeah, it's just there's so many of them. How do you reach the audience? They're scattered all over the state. You can't afford to travel to all of them.
No, you can't. What you can do is you can encourage your members to reach out to that local school. You're within 20 miles of Ottumwa, Iowa. You are the groundwater professional. There's two of you, and they're great. You're both groundwater professionals. You're within driving distance to Ottumwa. You may have had a kid going to K through 12 at that high school. You know the science teacher. Reach out to them and say, when you're talking about the water cycle, when you're talking about water or hydrology or geology, I would be happy to come down and bring my rig and set it up, and you guys can come and look and I can talk about it. It's a day out of the class. They don't have to prepare anything. But also, you can reach out to your state association of groundwater professionals and say, can you donate hydrologic cycle posters to your teachers, to your schools? Can you participate at the association level of sponsoring classrooms of Awesome Aquifer kits? Teachers are budgeted. It's real tight. You got to buy your own pencils, bring your own baby wipes, whatever it is. If you can have somebody say, you know what? Albrecht Well Drilling has now sponsored a classroom of Awesome Aquifer kits. I know, they did that. What? Oh, okay. That goes a long way, because now that teacher has something tangible to teach what an aquifer is and how the groundwater moves and things like that. So by encouraging that relationship between agency, between oversight, and working with your state association is and can be very important.
Well, then I'm going to piggyback right on that. I think things like the Awesome Aquifer Kit are how you do it. I don't know that you can programmatically just get all these trade classes put across the country and get enough people in them. But things like the Awesome Aquifer Kit are something that you can do on a broad scale to actually, possibly raise some awareness. And that kind of, planting those seeds, the earlier, the better, so that maybe there's at least some awareness. Because, I think I was reading a post, a blog from Chamber of Commerce where 3M had dumped $500 million into education for advanced manufacturing techniques, right? So they made a $500 million investment to try to train the people that they're going to need to do the job over the next 30 years. I don't know how you get around that kind of competition, other than try to make sure you've got people at least aware of what you're doing and that it has value.
Thank you. Good? All right. I'm going to move on to the next question because it is directly to Harold.
I think we're out of time, aren't we? Or
You have 25 minutes to answer this question.
thank you, guys. Yeah, would this be? Are there any Illinois regulators in the room?
Oh, I didn't read the question. Do you need me to read it?
Yeah. How does your funding?
Oh, no. It says, question for Harold. Any insight on if and when Illinois will get a new code?
That's the question I was dreading. No, that's why I asked if there's anybody specifically familiar with Illinois code. Yes, it happens, not quite constantly, but it's been revised and updated, and we've, it's not I don't want to offend anybody here, but it's not written in red ink like the Gospels and the Bible. It's a living document that has to change with time, and it does. Sometimes it starts with administrative rules or memos, and then when we accumulate a need or one of the needs that happened in recent years for me was the advent of the geothermal drilling and needing some kind of regulation and oversight for that. So it happens periodically, and it's kind of a continuous operation, but we kind of develop a file, and then when it's expensive and it takes time and energy to make a change to the code, and there are risks associated with it because of groups with big lobbying budgets. But sometimes it's justified, and that's when we change the code. If there's so I don't know that we're going to throw it away and start over unless it lapses in a sunset clause or something, and we have to start over. But does that explain how Illinois code works, or address the question?
I know it's a Harold question, but I'll piggyback off the tail of that one too, but because well codes in the states that have them all across the country are notoriously difficult to change. I mean, it literally almost, if you want to change it year over year, it's a legislative action. And so really, as we're thinking about, Minnesota, which has a pretty good well code, is still kind of starting to get a little bit dated. And it's really challenging for us to change rule by rule because it's an expensive, cumbersome process. It's long, it's drawn out, it turns into a multi-year endeavor to do it. And so creating boards, creating other mechanisms to make sure we can evolve these codes more nimbly, as opposed to having to look at these things in like 20 years and try to forecast for 20 years what we need a well code to cover. I mean, it's really challenging. I imagine, Harold, that Illinois runs into kind of the same challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
An example of how the well code has been changed, we never used to use, well, I say never. I think the first plastic pipe we used for well casing was probably in the very late 50s, and it wasn't in our code, and eventually it was, and also with the advent of the geothermal, more in geothermal drilling, there are various kinds of grouts that are appropriate for certain conditions, and to specify that in a code with great detail is certain to allow it to be, or force it to be obsolete sooner. So a lot of those codes are written much like, in Illinois, written much like the U.S. Constitution, and then a little bit tighter for the local, the state constitution and the local government. And some of the Illinois code works kind of like that. So if there's a local contamination of some sort, the state may not cover that in their code except in generality as far as guidelines, but maybe the county has an ordinance or special case that they have to apply. So that's how we try to handle it in Illinois, but the golden rule also applies. And clouds are better judgment sometimes, so the one with the money rules. Right?
All right. Thank you, Harold. The next question is more going along to the service industry, the wells. It's how can we encourage contractors to protect the resource and sell their services to do well abandonment and plugging? I think that question's asking if they're not willing to do abandonment and plugging, how do we talk them into doing it?
Most of the successful well sealing programs that I've ever seen across the country are a program by a state health department with a dedicated effort to do that. Minnesota, I think, had the same question like 20 some years ago and put on, dedicated some funding to, make well sealings happen. So if you're actually looking at specific tasks like that, creating activity, a program, and actually working with the contracting industry to make it happen does work. So I forget what the number is, but I think the Minnesota Department of Health won a national award for its well sealing program many moons ago. So it can be successful. You just have to program for it and have a dedicated effort.
And it may be written in the state code on how that well is to be abandoned and or sealed as well. And that's going to vary from state to state across the country. whether you have to just fill it with neat cement, bottom to top, or whether you have to blow it up inside, break it all out, and then seal it with concrete or bentonite or whatever that is. So that's going to vary.
So drillers that don't want to do that service, they don't want to plug wells, how do you encourage them to sell their service? How do you encourage them to show up with their drill rig and plug a well if they're not wanting to do it? If it's the only driller in the whole area and he's not wanting to plug wells, how do you talk him into doing that?
Get a driller from another area.
Okay,
Bring someone in from out of state.
okay.
Yeah. I don't think you can actually talk someone in to doing that. It's another set of skills, another set of tools that contractor may not have on hand. However, they will know somebody that'll do that.
The thing that happens when you create a program for it, and again, it comes back to making a program that can pay for it and that you can put a string of them together. One of the biggest problems with going to do, if you're a well driller, right, and you're drilling wells, you got to break your momentum, go do something else. Where if you create a program where you know you're going to have a week's worth of well sealing, you can get some efficiency on your dollars, and you'll have a lot better chance of getting someone to do it because they know they're not going to have to switch gears day after day to go and pick up the one-off well sealing. So again, programs like state level programs can be very, very effective in getting well sealings to happen.
Okay. All right. Did you have something?
Yes, a lot of the permits we have are conditional based on sealing the wells that are no longer used or pose a threat. And that's a little leverage that the health department can have. They won't.
So if you won't issue a permit, if they won't abandon the other wells that are on the property, then they've kind of got to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They can choose not to if they don't want a well that bad. Well,
Yeah, I agree. All right, the next one. Do you have experience with chemical and mechanical well rehabilitations beyond shock chlorinating and whether they are feasible on a residential scale versus municipal?
yes and yes.
That answers it.
We usually don't use 1,500 or 2,000 gallons of hydrochloric acid in a private well, but we may use it in municipal well or industrial. But yes, we do not use fracking like they may in some places where there's real tight geology but the surging, the chemical treatment, it depends what is appropriate, and to know that takes some research. You see what's in the well, what's the cause of the problem before you start throwing solutions. If you take a sandstone aquifer that's primarily silica and want to acidize it, the improvement probably isn't going to be much unless you have some very special acid. But if you have dolomite or limestone that has lost as the intake area of the well, then it might be, of course, you might do some cleaning in the well that you do, whether it's municipal or private well. You might clean what you can mechanically, but then that would be more appropriate for maybe hydrochloric acid or some other acid with inhibitor so it doesn't hurt the well construction materials. But so yes, it's a lot of those appropriate for both domestic and the larger wells. You never know if that's going to be economically feasible until you see the results, because redevelopment there's enough uncertainty that it's not real settling all the time. But
Anyone else? Okay.
Let's go rapid fire here, see how many we can get done.
You want to just keep going? Do we need the next question? We've answered a lot of educational questions already. Do you guys want to touch base on that educational question again?
Just know that are you in a position, do you know the people that would be in a position to do anything about it? And if you don't know the people that are in a position to do something about that, then that question doesn't matter. You really need to create the relationships that can go from you to the well contractor before you worry about going you to the well contractor to the well owner.
Okay.
I guess the one thing I'd comment on that is generally within your state, you have an association of groundwater professionals. Use them. Use them when you start talking about, we have to do some outreach to figure out how many wells have PFAS. Okay, we're gonna need to figure out this. We wanna talk about this at the agency level. The first call you should make should be to, one of the first calls you should make is to the local state association. You will shock their executive director or secretary by calling and asking and saying, hey, can you guys work with us to try and reach your customers? The other thing would be reach out, and this is not just a sales pitch, but reach out to NGWA to see what has been done. Don't have to reinvent the wheel, because there are things that have been done talking about flooded wells, how to trace, test, and tend, and treat. There's information about PFAS, what the information should know. And as a lot of people noted earlier, the relationship between state and the homeowner is vastly different than that of the relationship between the groundwater contractor and the homeowner. So be to use that as a valuable resource.
I like the word entice in there. I've been able to entice a couple drillers to come out to my trainings for well owners by, talking to them about the profits. Because obviously if they're there, they're showing their truck, they're putting their name out, they're handing their business card out. There's a possibility that they're gonna be the one that gets called to go do that work after they're done there. So you might be able to entice them to come to your educational events that way. Next one, how does funding or lack thereof impact your customers that you serve?
I mean, that's obviously a big one. I think the Minnesota Department of Health studied that question and found that the afford it piece was a huge impedance to people actually looking for the problem. So if people can't afford to solve a problem, they may not go even look to find out if they have it. So making sure that, much like we saw with ARPA funding and some other programs that we can leverage maybe nationally down to the state level, finding creative mechanisms to create the funding for people who need to take care of their wells will certainly improve that relationship.
Are there things that labs can do to help drillers and pump installers with testing needs?
Perfect. Dave nodded at me again. This is actually one of the things I am most worried about, honestly, labs and lab capacity. If you look at labs are kind of, I don't know many states that have increasing lab capacity. NELAP standards make it incredibly challenging for rural areas to afford the professionals necessary in order to qualify as an environmental health lab. I think we need them. But the problem that I'm seeing, especially in Minnesota, is you see that 75% of the labs exist around the metro area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then you start getting out into greater Minnesota, and you can't find a lab for 2 hours. And so trying to get this testing done, as I keep on hearing people talk about, we're gonna do more well testing, we're gonna take better care of these water supplies. I'm like, how? Grand Marais, if you're up at one of the well contractors in Grand Marais, Minnesota, which is up on the very tip, right before you get to Canada, has to go through a very complicated set of hurdles in order to make sure his water samples get collected and down to the cities for analysis before they run out of their holding time. So lab capacity is something that we should be taking a hard look at and make sure we've got enough capacity to do the things that everybody in this room says is necessary.
Has potential relationships between the expansion of rural water services and the drop of new private well installations been considered? Is rural water encroaching on your industry?
They can, but in a lot of cases, they're serving areas that don't have a lot of water availability. I mean, the Water Systems Council has got countless studies of how affordable private well systems are versus any type of piped alternative. So if we're letting the economics guide it, they really shouldn't. And if we're putting in rural water systems where we have really good and strong groundwater resources, then really we're wasting money that actually should be spent in places that have needs for water supply.
What are some helpful tips when passing on information to the young bloods? How can you effectively train someone with no experience? How long does it take?
You're still learning, aren't you?
At my young age, two things come to mind when we're training for me, and I don't see any employees of ours in the room. One is, some guy said, trying to teach a pig to sing will only irritate the pig. And then the other one is, this guy's picking apples, holding the pig up to eat the apples off the tree. And the neighbor says, well, doesn't that take an awful lot of time? The other farmer said, well, what's time to a pig? And that's when you train somebody and select, you have to start with the right person, and that's hard. It's hard to find them, and then it's hard to be, the timings is important, and if you try to teach someone that doesn't have aptitude or interest and the right attitude, it's tough. But we can feel sorry for ourselves and helpless, or we think back, and there have been leaders and research people generations ago, and they're few and far between now and they were back then. So we need to keep looking, and I don't have the right answer, except you need to teach people when they're ready to learn. The trick is to know when and where. So how's there for a very non-definitive answer?
How long does it take to get an 18-year-old to drilling status?
It depends how narrow the training is. We look at fast food restaurants, McDonald's or many others, they narrow that task and they can make a pretty consistent product. But we drill 2-inch wells, and we have rotary bits for 42-inch rotary bits, and we do a variety of work in our area, straddling several markets. And if we don't, we would starve. And so that makes it hard for us to specialize and have good efficiency. However, when our drillers and service people have taken that experience and decided to go into business for themselves, quite often they're successful taking the licensure exams, and they realized that they were learning something very, very important, but didn't know was happening until they needed it. So it really varies. We try to get, it takes years, not days, not months. And if you have someone that knows bad habits, it's like teaching some stringed instrument player that doesn't have the right hold on the bow, and it takes longer to unlearn that bad habit. So it's really, it's tough. And then we have a couple young people that are started about the same time, same age, and it's a morale problem or challenge to manage that, because one learns faster than the other, but both of them provide an essential component to running the drilling program. So I would say years. I didn't have a driver's license the first year. I drilled during the summer, and I can still get my driver's license, so it's good. But years.
Can we answer one more question?
Oh, go ahead.
All right, so the question that I think that I'd like us to maybe leave with here is the question about, do the regional groundwater associations offer business operations training for small business owners? Does NGWA? And the answer is most of the time not, and most of the time it is because the class is not recognized for continuing education. And so, this goes back to one of the comments that I made about we need to widen what qualifies as continuing education, because I will tell you that the companies that need that kind of information the most are the exact kind of companies that aren't going to show up for a class if it doesn't have a CEU attached, right? So the people that do show up in that room for the non-CE hour to learn and better themselves are already probably the people you look at and say, hey, those folks do a pretty good job. The folks that need the education aren't going because it's not required of them. So make sure that it's a thing that these associations can offer and give people credit for. We'll get more people in the rooms and we'll get more people understand the message. And the other thing that tails on the back of that, a company that is well-funded and doesn't have to worry about its financial solvency is going to make much better decisions in the field. If they don't have an incentive to cut corners, move on to the next thing too fast, if they're out of that driven, that production mentality and can get to the maintenance mentality, you're going to see a higher level of installations and higher quality water supplies.
All right, we're right at time, guys. Give these guys a hand of applause. Thank you.